Welcome to Mission Evolution Radio Show with Gwilda Wiyaka, bringing together today's leading experts to uncover ever-deepening spiritual truths and the latest scientific developments in support of the evolution of humankind. For more information on Mission Evolution Radio with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit www.missionevolution.org. And now, here's the host of Mission Evolution, Miss Gwilda Wiyaka.
They walk among us, the mute victims of abuse. How can we tell if a child, friend, loved one, or associate is enduring abuse in silence? If we do uncover hidden abuse, what do we do about it? Mission Evolution Radio TV show is coming to you around the world on the X Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net. With us this hour to broach the disturbing topic of abuse and those who suffer from it is Jennifer Gardella. Jennifer is a survivor of vicious domestic violence. She's now on a mission to educate both victims as well as their friends, loved ones, and family members on the signs we all need to listen for and how to take action. In her new book, Domestic Violence Awareness, Listen for the Whispers of Abuse, Jennifer shares her story as she educates readers on the very important topic. Her website, jennifergardella.com. Jennifer, thank you for joining us on Mission Evolution.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
What's your educational background?
Oh, so I have a PhD from Rutgers University in Educational Statistics and Measurement. I did my undergrad work at Fordham University, but often say I just majored in the fun of New York City.
There you have it. I understand you're a survivor of domestic abuse yourself. What role did this play in choosing your areas of study and where you went from there?
Yeah, so I actually didn't know I was a survivor of domestic abuse until I escaped, which is really interesting. So I graduated with my PhD in 2013. At the same time, met my abuser. We started dating, eventually became married, and I eventually escaped from that. One of the reasons why I have this area and I've dedicated so much of my time to ensuring that victims and survivors, not only that there's awareness to support them, but that they know that where they can get services from, is because when I was living in abuse, I had no idea. So that is really what informed my decision to step up and say, we've got to do something about this.
So, what in your history sets you up to be in an abusive relationship to start out with?
That is a great question. And I think that I'm very honest, I'm in my 50s, and I was raised in a time where women, I believe, were going through, at least in my world, going through a pretty big transition about, this difference between working from home, working and staying home with children. A man will always take care of you. And I believe that it was in that confusion and never really finding myself that I got into relationships that weren't particularly healthy.
So, you say you were in an abusive situation, you didn't know it. How is that possible?
Well, because I wasn't really aware of what domestic violence looks like. So many people like me believe that domestic violence, the only signs are broken bones and bruises. And we only look for, women who wind up in the hospital repeatedly. And the truth is 50% of victims report domestic abuse, physical domestic abuse. 95% report psychological abuse. So that, again, led me to believe that there was a lot of work to be done in this area and a lot of people to help.
So let me see if I can get those figures right. 50% of the people that suffer from abuse report it, and 95% of the ones that suffer from emotional abuse report it.
50%, no, not report it. 50% report that the abuse was physical. 95% report that abuse is psychological. So as a society, we only look for broken bones and bruises when really we need to be listening for the stories that our victims and survivors are telling us so we can get them help.
So what are those stories? What are we looking for?
So the first one that we're always looking for is something called love bombing. And this is when, and I should say this, I always speak from the woman's point of view abused by a male abuser. I am very well aware that this can happen in multiple different types of relationships as well as to men. But what we look for is a girlfriend who has a new love interest, and he is what we call love bombing her. Suddenly, he's sending flowers to the office. They're spending way too much time together. There's grandiose gestures of love. And you get this funny feeling that it's going way too quickly, way too deep, too fast. So, and he says things to her like, "All of my exes are crazy, but you seem so normal." He'll say, "You can't go to Pilates. We're going to go away again." And what he's doing is he's roping her in. That's a big first red flag. The other stories that we're listening for are when he starts to take control of her life. So suddenly, not only can she not go to Pilates, but he is doing things like dictating when she can work. He's dictating what they're having. A big red flag is where they're spending the holidays, what happens on those holidays, because they tend to be fraught with awful, just general awfulness. Birthdays are often ruined, vacations are always ruined. The abuser at this point is really roping our victim into a world where she has no control and he just controls her entire life.
So, what creates a he or a she that has the propensity to do this to another person?
Yeah, good question. I'm not a psychologist, and there's very few, interestingly enough, psychologists who have studied abusers, because abusers in and of themselves don't seek out treatment. So we kind of retrofit a diagnosis through helping a victim or survivor based on what they're telling us and what they need to heal from. There is some general belief that what happens, as what we believe happened to my abuser, early on in life, he somehow was being or seeing something at home, a lot of fighting, right? That's usually a big tip off. There's chaos and confusion at home. Maybe it's a military family. There's an awful lot of control going on by one of the parents. And at home, he's seeing a lot of bullying. And then at school, he's also seeing a lot of bullying. And so he sets himself up in life to be a very controlling person and say, "This is never going to happen to me in my home again."
So, in other words, he's the victim of some level of abuse and decides that he's going to be the abuser rather than the victim,
Exactly, and I
or
wanna
she,
say,
or
yeah, and
she.
I
Yeah.
wanna say again, that's a very general path to abuse, and we don't really have any concrete data to support it. It's just a belief that something happens early in childhood where they have very unhealthy attachments.
Or no attachments at all, it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you personally get out of figure out that you were in an abusive situation and then get out of it?
Yeah, my story's a little crazy. So it was the beginning of COVID. The house, which was normally a pot of boiling water, suddenly turned into a pressure cooker. I have three daughters. Two of them were in college and were home with us. There are children from my first marriage, and they came to me and said, "Mom, this is abuse. We need to leave." They had been doing research, talking to their friends, talking to their friends' parents, talking to their own guidance counselors, and had really knocked my socks off, honestly, and said, "We're out. We got to get out of here." We were lucky in a way, since it was COVID and colleges were closed down. My middle daughter was renting an apartment with her friends out at the University of Pittsburgh. The friends had gone home with their families, so the apartment was empty, so except for beds and kitchen things, which is all that you need. And so we were able to flip on the Wi-Fi and flip on the electricity on our 6-hour drive out to Pittsburgh. During that time, I mean, they really did hammer home the point that they were not going back there, and I had a big decision to make. So that is how we got out. And the reason why, one of the things we have to understand about victims is that it can take them up to 7 times to leave, and that's
Mm.
average. So it can take between me, 1, and probably 20, right? And just the law of averages there. Um, and I knew that my children, in that very strong moment of theirs, having brought me out of domestic violence, I I knew that if I had gone back in, I would have lost them, and they obviously are the most important people on the planet to me. So I was going to take their concerns very seriously as a mother. I instantly, and they instantly also reconnected with one of my best friends who was sitting waiting for me to come back to her. So it was that support that I had in the process that really allowed me to stay out.
Had your husband at the time, had he pretty much alienated you and isolated you from everybody that you had a heart connection with?
Yes, absolutely. My business was dilapidated, uh, and um, I did not have the relationships that I had in the past with people. He was incredibly controlling over who I talked to, how often I was allowed to text in the house, all of those things. And so I had lost touch with a lot of people, and it was, I want to say, really fun to reconnect with them afterwards as soon as I got over the hump of healing, which was a long journey.
I can only imagine. So were you, you guys just exited stage left really quickly. Were you afraid for your physical safety?
Absolutely. So I had been through a divorce before from someone who I was very good friends with. We established peace for the sake of our three daughters right away. Um, so I had been through divorce. So I was expecting, okay, we'll divide up the stuff and that's great. We'll leave each other alone. No big deal. Plus, it was a second marriage. So we didn't have joint assets together. I thought it was going to be really easy. I'll cut to the short of the story, and that's at the end, I had 105 instances of stalking, harassment, and unwanted communication, which included banging on our door at 6 o'clock in the morning, stalking me, standing behind me on the elliptical at the gym, watching me work out, doing stalking my children at their jobs. It was awful what we went through. So yes, there were many times that I was scared for my life.
While you were with him, was he physically abusive or was it the emotional abuse?
We've uncovered when, yes, there was a little bit of what my therapist had called microaggression, a little bit of pushing and shoving, a little bit of throwing things at me. Nothing that would be considered, though. I wasn't like hit across the face, slapped across the face, or ever punched. But there was microaggression, which, as we know, also escalates. So I probably, by the time I got out, I was probably about to go through another escalation because of COVID. So I was very grateful to be out. But yes, there was some physical abuse.
What form did the emotional abuse take?
Oh, yeah.
Let me
So,
count the ways, right?
yeah, that's a good way to put it. So, the first thing, again, is the control. And when someone is controlling your life, you lose your self confidence completely. And you almost become dependent on them for everything. You feel that you can't make a decision because you're definitely going to make the wrong decision. That's what abusers instill into their victims. You are wrong all the time. It doesn't matter if it's the dress you're wearing, the box of pasta you pick out at the supermarket, everything that you do is wrong. And so your self confidence just erodes. Probably, though, the biggest change is that I was trauma bonded to my abuser. I believed with all of my heart that everything in our relationship was my fault. Everything that had happened to him in his life that was wrong was my fault. And so I was shellacked with shame, as I like to say. And that was very hard to shake off. Since I was madly in love with him, also, I desperately wanted him back, which then created these weird cycles of how can you want someone back that treats you so badly, especially when you step out of it and the yelling and screaming had stopped.
Gotcha.
So,
Well, it's that magic moment where we're going to need to take a station break.
okay,
Jennifer
thanks.
and I will return very shortly, so don't go away. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Can we really be in an abusive relationship and not know it? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us this hour discussing the hidden signs of abuse is author of Domestic Violence Awareness. Listen for the whispers of abuse, Dr. Jennifer Gardella. Jennifer, what do you have people look for now, based on your history and your experience? What do you have people looking for when they think somebody may be being abused?
Good question. So I actually have people listening. I always say that our victims and survivors are telling us their stories and we're not listening to them clear enough. So if they come home from a vacation and they share with you in the coffee room or over at the water cooler that their vacation or holiday was fraught with screaming and control, that is a really good indication that you have an abuser on a victim on your hand. When they say things to you like, I have no control over the money, I'm not allowed to work, he took my car keys and I wasn't allowed to drive my car, he didn't pay the insurance so I couldn't drive, or he won't pay the kids sports fees so no one could go to all of their practices last week. Those are really good indications that you've got a victim on your hands.
How can you tell the difference between emotional abuse victim and a physical abuse victim? I suspect that the physical one is also emotionally abused, but how can you tell when that line has been crossed?
So I would say that anyone that moves you from your space or causes you any physical pain is creating physical abuse. That's physical abuse, right? And you're going to see standard marks on them, either their wrist. You'll also see, interestingly enough, covering up. That could be an indication. Now, in the little bit of research that's available, most people who are physically abused, like you just said, are also psychologically abused. So not only you might see bruises in weird places, you're also, again, hearing those stories.
The stories of, well, I thought it was going to be a nice Christmas, but it was
He
that
was
one.
screaming the entire time. Yes.
Yeah, right, right. So things like I've heard friends say, no holiday isn't worth ruining.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So, what was your healing journey like while you were still being abused?
So I actually, about 6 months before I left, I started to do some research. I had, something passed across a social media feed about narcissism. And I went, oh, and I started to realize that I was probably living with a narcissist. Now, narcissist is a very dangerous word to use when you're dealing with a domestic violence uh, abuser, because that you don't have a diagnosis. So they usually then use that against you. But I watched a lot of videos on YouTube and I said, I wonder what I'm dealing with here. I didn't really get into a long healing journey before we left. But when I got out, the healing journey was long and extensive.
Expensive how?
Extensive,
Oh,
sorry, I don't think I
expensive.
was. Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
extensive. So it started when I knew that I had to file a restraining order. He was starting to stalk my daughters at work. Again, he was, 50 phone calls a day, emails, finding me out in the world. It was scary. And I called my local domestic violence center, who I'm now a volunteer for, actually, but I called a woman's place in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, looking for help with filing for a restraining order. We call them PFAs here in Pennsylvania. And I got on the phone crying, and they said, we are going to help you. Would you like to talk to someone? And based on what we were just talking about with the physical abuse, I said, I don't need to talk to anybody. I haven't been hit. Like, I don't have any black eyes. And the woman on the other end of the phone said, ma'am, you're calling here looking for help with a restraining order. You are scared out of your mind. You just escaped this relationship. I think you need to talk to somebody. It was then 8 sessions of crisis counseling, 20 sessions of talk therapy, 10 sessions of what's called EMDR, which is a very special therapy for victims and survivors. I then did countless support groups and 3 full 10-week educational programs with the center before I separated from services and then became a volunteer. So yeah, it was about a year and a half that it took me.
How long did it take you before the lights really came on and you realized how bad it had been?
I wasn't in therapy yet. I hadn't even made contact with the domestic violence center. And his best friend's wife called me, and they had heard that I had left, and they had seen a lot when he was with me. They had seen a lot when they were with his first wife. And she said, he didn't love you. He loved controlling you. And I remember I'm grateful for her and her wisdom now. But that was like a 10-pound weight being dropped on my foot. I was like, wow, and she continued and she said, you were like an appliance, right? You were something that he owned that he needed to shelve and then take off the shelf at will. And I was like, oh my gosh. And that's
Right.
when I really started to dig.
Started to dig into information and see what's really going on here.
Yeah, the good thing and bad thing is that there's a lot of people that need the help and have stories to share. but that's bad in and of itself because people are going through a lot out there. But there's no shortage of Facebook groups and YouTube videos where you can go and share your story, or at least just listen and read to what other people are going through.
And do you feel that that helps give perspective and maybe wake somebody up to, oh, that sounds just like me?
Yes, it does. And just as important, it gives us a sense of community because
Mm.
no one in our circle understands what we're going through. Everyone wants to, I had escaped. Everybody hated him. Everyone's giving me high fives. Oh my gosh, I hear you're out. This is great. I'm so glad you're back. And I was dying inside, still not understanding what I had gone through, still madly in love with him, which was very, very hard. And so being in those groups, just listening to videos sometimes makes you realize there's a lot of people who have gone through exactly what I went through.
I had a woman say to me one time that um, he reflected what I wanted most in a soulmate, but it wasn't who he was. I was in love with an illusion.
It's called the dark mirror.
Mm.
And it can be so the abuser will mirror your emotions and they'll try to get close to you. And then so you're right, they create this illusion of who you need them to be to open up. And then the dark part is that they then turn that against you. And they say, oh, yeah, you're not, they'll use your most vulnerable points and throw them back on you. It's very painful.
So I suspect that they also, again, whether male or female, have to be pretty intuitive, able to read people well to figure out exactly how to manipulate this.
Yes, and they are brute force of nature
Mm.
also. I mean, they can plow in and take over a person or a room before anyone really knows what's happening. And again, I think that they are slightly brilliant in the process because while I believe in the beginning of a relationship you're investigating whether, this person's compatible, the abuser is evaluating you on so many other factors that you don't even know are important, what's important to them. And that is, are you going to be a good victim?
Bottom line, isn't it?
Yes.
Um, Jennifer, what steps do you wish you'd taken before you left?
Before I
Before.
left,
Hmm.
um, I think the best thing that any victim can do is safety plan. I look back and I say, I'm sorry to that woman in 2020 who was watching abuse escalate. And I was just like the little hamster on the hamster wheel, trying to make the house calm down, trying to make him happier. And I think that I did put myself in some danger, which could have been avoided if I had done some safety planning, like if this gets worse. But I was determined to always make it better. In my mind, it couldn't get worse. So I do wish that I had done some safety planning. Money was not a huge issue at that point, but where was I going to go if I needed to go quickly? And given that we didn't have kids with us half the time, we were alone half the time, and a lot of scary things can happen. We also traveled a lot. And I know that there were several times when my life was probably a little at risk and I didn't know it. So definitely safety planning so that when I could leave, I could have left a little quicker.
So, what do you recommend when forming an exit strategy?
Yeah, so the big first thing is where are you going to go, right? And how are you going to get there? So if you have a situation where you are in a neighborhood and you have really good friends, they probably know what you're going through and they probably have seen some stuff that you don't even realize. So making sure that you have one or two trusted friends that you can run to with your children if you have them is critical. I would even go as far as to say, if abuse is escalating, if the hitting is becoming worse, if he's screaming more and more all the time, if it really does transfer to the kids more and more, then you need to do some bigger planning. You need to pack bags and have them at friends' homes. You need to start putting money away, which is very tricky to do because it's pretty illegal if you're married. You can't just hide money from your spouse, even if you're the victim of abuse. So, that's when you go to your friends and say, hey, what can we do here? But anything that you can do to start conversations. And what the abuser is going to do when you leave is going to spin the entire situation on you. So it is really important that your friends and family members are very, very, very well aware of what you're going through. So it doesn't surprise them. And so he doesn't try to control the situation afterwards.
But from what you said, you might not be aware of what you're going through. So you have to do a certain amount of processing to get to the point that you can start getting prepared. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. You have to be so aware of what's going on in your home so that you can counterbalance it in your mind and say, this isn't love.
Hmm.
And once you get to the point where you realize that abuse isn't love, love does not hurt. And that is the easiest way to say it. If your relationship is hurting you emotionally or physically, it needs to stop. End of story. And more than likely, again, you have an abuser on your hand, which is so hard.
So, how can a person who's being abused know if they need to drop and run or if they have time for an exit strategy?
If your relationship is hurting you physically and emotionally, right? That may be the line of this interview today. It's time to go. And I say that very honestly. It's not going to get better, especially if it's been happening for years. Know that there are so many options for you out there that seem really scary now, but your life will just get so much better once you make the decision. You'll go through a little bit of strife at first. It could be really, really hard, but it is time to go if you feel emotionally or physically unsafe.
So, if a person just drops and runs, throws the kids and the dog in the vehicle, and heads out with no destination, what should their first destination be?
Well, with the dog is an interesting issue because a lot of shelters do not have the ability to take pets. So that's something to consider also. It's scary to leave them with the abuser, also scary to take them because it limits your options. But hopefully you have that house that you can go to, whether it's a parent, a relative, or a friend's house, you go there. And again, hopefully they already know the situation and they are ready to help you. Every county has a domestic violence center in the United States. So there's plenty of resources where you can find out that information, call, find out what their shelter requires. If you don't need shelter, if you don't need to run to a shelter, then they're probably going to have all the counseling support that you need.
And do they also, as a rule, give you support on how, like you were saying, you're trying to figure out how to do a restraining order or how to initiate the divorce or how to, information on how best to secure the children?
That gets tricky and is county by county. So, and state by state. So, here, my experience was that you could get support from your standard legal aid operation if you didn't make that much money. So there are legal aid services available for those who meet some minimum income. Uh, but most centers do have that counseling support group component. I was very fortunate. My center gave me all the counseling services that I needed.
Great. Well, it's time again for us to take another station break. Jennifer and I will be right back to continue our discussion. So you stay right there. This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. Is there any escape? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. With us discussing how to expose domestic abuse is Jennifer Gardella. Her website, jennifergardella.com. Jennifer, when you're in the situation, can it really appear like there's no way out? Is there an illusion that's been spun around you that makes you believe that you don't have any way to get out of there?
Absolutely. So I always talk about the psychological barriers that the victim is already put up, and I talk about the barriers that society puts up. And once those two meld together, it's almost impossible for a victim to leave. So a victim believes that she's responsible for the situation. And if she improves in some way, cleans better, cooks better, loses the weight, he'll be happy and they'll have this amazing life. She doesn't know, by the way, that that's never going to happen. He's always moving the target. But there's also societal factors, your religion, your family, your culture. They may not support a woman just walking out, and that can be very hard. And then there's financial, which is probably the number one issue. Where are you going to go if you are on a mortgage? More than likely you will not have the credit to just go and rent an apartment. So that can be frightening. And if he does control the money, which by the time you're ready to leave, he does control the money, how are you going to pay for things?
Yeah, it sounds like a trap for sure.
It is.
Does anyone really completely heal from domestic abuse?
I'd like to hope. I mean, I think that your past and your story is always with you, and you can use it as a ball and chain around, holding you back, or you can use it like I do to propel me forward. Do I think about the abuse every day? I'm just going to be perfectly honest with you. I do. I get triggered all the time. I am remarried to a man who is incredibly understanding of the abuse that I went through, and we talk about it all the time. I'll say, I don't say, "Oh, I'm being triggered," but we do have like a time where I can take a breath and say, "I need to take a break from this. Like something is wrong." And it happens when I watch or hear couples interacting and I know that abuse is going on, she's yelling at him or telling whatever it is. And I'm like, oh, I remember that life. It also can happen when you're watching television. You may think that you're going to be watching a show about a family and suddenly you're going to be watching or even reading when I'm reading a book. And all of a sudden I think, oh my gosh, this is about domestic violence. I don't want to read this, and it brings it back for you. But if you do the work, like I did the work, I basically got a PhD in healing from abuse. You can sail through life, and it's never gonna be easy, but yeah, so I'd like to say I've gotten about as close as I can.
So we've been talking kind of more about when the victim is female and the abuser is male. What is the difference? What differences does a person face if the abuser is the female and the abused is the male?
So again, there's not a ton of research on this because men are much more embarrassed. But so let me start off by saying it's 25% of men, 33% of women, 50% of the LGBT community, and 50% of those with disabilities are victims. So those are the stats that we're dealing with. Pretty high numbers. And a lot of people, especially men, try to hide it. Much
So,
more so. They might not be macho, it's just not something that they wanna talk to other people about, and usually the men that I have talked to, independent, friends that have come out and shared with me, it's always, "Thank goodness I have someone I can talk to now because no one understands." Because we turn around and we say, "Wait, you're the man. What do you mean she was controlling everything?" Just as a society, that old school mentality.
what about physical abuse? It's the same thing. Well, you're bigger than she is. What's the big deal, right?
Yeah, I would imagine it would be the exact same thing, and men don't wanna say that their wife is hitting them.
Or threatening them or whatever else. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So let's talk about different kinds of abuse. What is financial abuse?
Oh, that's a good question. So it looks like either he has control of all the money, right? So she is usually on a small allowance that she has to ask for. He pays all the bills when he wants to. He may, on the flip side, as in my situation, um, I paid a lot of the bills and always was my credit card at the grocery store. And then I was blamed for never paying anything. So it's this constant state of confusion is really what all levels of abuse have dripped in. With financial abuse, it was he would scream at me, "I pay 100% of the bills in this house and for all vacations," which wasn't true. He was just paying the mortgage. I was paying everything else that we did. There's just a lot of blaming of I do this for you and you owe me. Sometimes we also do see women who are the ones who are the breadwinners, and then the man actually lays on them a guilt trip for making them feel bad about not making money. So, "Oh, you have this big salary and make all this money and support me, you make me feel bad." I mean, it really gets very twisted with money, based on who's making what and who's controlling what. But that's what financial abuse looks like.
So what's reactive abuse?
Oh, reactive abuse is my entire life. So, reactive abuse is when an abuser comes at a target and picks on them, and they will dig in and needle them to get a reaction. So, they will question your integrity, they will call you a liar, they will accuse you of cheating, and you sit there defending yourself. I am not. How could my husband say something like this to me? Why are you saying these awful things to me? I can't believe this. And you get emotional. and usually you're yelling back. And as you get more emotional, and now, well, let's just say I would get more emotional, I would start to cry. And now he had my reaction to work with. So all of a sudden, I was unstable. All of a sudden, I was the one that was yelling. They have this ability to go full force with a fight and then stop cold. And you, as the target, the one with the emotions, are left in this puddle. And then they pick on you for that. And that is the horror of reactive abuse.
So, as of late, we're hearing a lot about gaslighting, and I think this fits right in here. So, would you
Yes.
mind sharing with our audience what is gaslighting?
So gaslighting is the process. It comes from a movie back, like one of those older movies, where the abuser wants the victim to believe that she is absolutely crazy. And so it looks like, I didn't tell you we were going on vacation then. Why did you buy those plane tickets? Or I did tell you we were going on vacation. Why don't I have those plane tickets? You can never do anything right. You're always crazy. You're always blamed. And the whole idea is to make you believe that you heard things wrong, you're not paying attention, and you don't care about them enough. And so the whole idea is everything is your fault.
And so it sounds like it's a purposeful, damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation.
It is awful. You walk on eggshells. You never know. I never knew when I came down in the morning what I was going to be walking into. Was I going to be walking into my loving husband who would have my coffee ready? Or was I going to be walking into someone who found a sock next to the dryer and decided to unleash a holy hell on me because I was all of a sudden messy, which I am a little messy, by the way. So sometimes that was like sort of justified, but not in that situation. And so it is just a situation where, like I said, it's not even eggshells. You're always just walking on landmines and you don't stand a chance.
Would the loving husband show up just long enough to rope you back in and then pounce again?
Yeah. So what happens is, remember when we talked about love bombing before? So
Mhm.
that you get love bombed and then they drip in abuse. And then they tell you, well, we could be up here in the good part if you would get it together, if you would lose weight, if you would cook better, if my kids liked you more, whatever they wanted to scream at you for that day. And then you'd work hard and then there'd be a little bit more of love bombing. You'd see that amazing relationship again. And then all of a sudden you're dragged back down into the pit of hell. And so it's this cycle. And I learned the cycle, and I can remember called one of his best friends about the cycle. And his best friend said to me, Jen, it's a problem that you realize that there is this cycle of abuse, but it's a problem also that it's happening. So that was horrific.
Mm, Sounds like a lot of his friends were your friends more than his, right?
Yes, they were.
So, would you describe trauma bonding?
Oh, yeah, I mentioned that briefly before. So, trauma bonding is when we have this cycle of abuse, right? So, the abuser wants the victim to know that she has to run her whole life around his. And it is the process of love bombing and abuse, and love bombing and abuse, and love bombing and abuse, so that the victim believes with all of her heart that it's her fault. And she just keeps trying. And at the same time, this weird things happens where, for me at least, as a victim, I really did believe that he was perfect for me. Like, he hit a lot of the normal markers that I was looking for in a spouse, in a mate, in a relationship, a companion. And so that also got all worked up with me, where I had decided, I'm like, wow, this could really go the distance. And he was roping me in. So my trauma bond, I always say it was like rebar, covered with concrete. That's how hard it was to break that trauma bond for me.
Well, you're always waiting for your soulmate to come back when it was an illusion, right?
A total illusion. Absolutely.
So, again, we can use he and she interchangeably here, can't we? Don't all these apply regardless of whether you're the male or the female in the relationship or a gay partnership?
Exactly. It's one of the hardest things that I talk about when I do this work, because, again, I'm only comfortable speaking from my story and my truth with it. But yeah, such a good point that you bring that up, because men are victims. It is very prevalent in the LGBTQ community as well. And so it's just hard to, when you tell the stories or share examples, to use they. because then they could refer to a bunch of people in the conversation and it gets confusing.
Yeah, that gets confusing for me too. I understand. So explain post-separation abuse. You had a fair amount of that, didn't you?
I did, which was startling because again, hey, look, the relationship isn't going to work out. Let's just part, right? Why do you want all this? So post separation abuse is calling the office, stalking you at the office. It is stalking you in your home, near your home. It is banging on your door at 7 a.m. It looks like an unbelievable amount of emails. And an interesting part of post separation abuse, also, that is so interesting is legal abuse, which we don't talk about that much. And this is when you have an entire divorce negotiation settled, which we did. That was all his idea. I gave him everything he wanted in the original. And then you said, we're not doing that. Now, this is also legal abuse. It's also financial abuse because I had spent money on my attorney and he knew that as well. And also it was emotional abuse because now what the heck was going, what the heck was going to happen next? Like, are we just going to have to keep going through this? So that legal abuse is a big part of post separation abuse for sure. But it is that dark cloud, like I shared before. It was, oh, he had to join my gym, hated my gym, but now was at my gym all the time and would miraculously show up there every day, no matter what time I showed up. I actually went out and got my car checked regularly by a police officer for trackers because it was uncanny how he could show up wherever I was. It was like he was tracking me. It was crazy. And we just think that he was driving around all the time looking for me.
What's the motivation? I mean, they treat you like you're the scum of the earth, and all of a sudden they're obsessed with you. It's very strange, isn't it? We're going to have to pick up on the on the answer to that if you have it on the other side of a station break. Please stay with us as Jennifer and I continue to examine the complexities of dealing with domestic abuse. This is Mission Evolution, www.missionevolution.org. Must we destroy a family to save a child? This is Mission Evolution, missionevolution.org. We're continuing our discussion with the author of Domestic Violence Awareness. Listen for the Whispers of Abuse, Dr. Jennifer Gardella. Jennifer, let's talk about children a little bit.
Mhm.
There's a lot of times when the mother's being abused, but doesn't know to get out of it, but then the children are being abused as well. And so if you're a person that suspects that a child, you're a layperson, but suspects a child is being abused, usually they've been told not to tell, you'll destroy the family, this sort of thing. And it's a sticky widget, really, isn't it? What do you do if you're in that situation? You're pretty sure this child's being abused, you're a layperson, what do you do?
So in some states, there's something called, we have it here called Childline, where you can make an anonymous call and they can do a safety check on the family. If you are truly just like the parent of a friend, right? So the kid has a friend, the kid spends time in your house, you're hearing weird things. There's not a whole heck of a lot you actually can do legally. I would say that if you are a family member, you can move in a little closer because there's safety there, but know that you're going to have to go so slowly because the victim doesn't want to hear it. If they haven't left yet, then they don't want to hear it. So the only thing that you could really do is make sure that that child knows that you are a safe space. So if they have opened up to you and wow, that sounds scary, tell me more, I'm listening. Or you're always welcome in our home, right? And it depends on the age of the child too. So if the child is in high school, it may be more appropriate to say, if things heat up in your house, run over. But that would be on a case by case basis, and it would depend also on your relationship with the parents. So you don't want that child running back to their parents saying, Mrs. Smith says that you're an abuser or we're living in abuse, and because the kid will never be allowed there again.
All right, right. So, response. Do they have a recourse or a responsibility? Do you just have to kind of dance around the issue? What
I
do you
know the
do?
rules in Pennsylvania. So if you are a I'm just going to use some big words for me because I learned a lot when I was going through abuse. If you are a mandated reporter, meaning you're an attorney, you're a teacher, you're a therapist, you're a psychologist, there's a whole list of people who are required to report, then yes, you do have to call Childline and make a report that you are concerned. Absolutely. The average person, I don't think you're legally obligated, but keep a close eye because they really need you. That
Yeah,
would be my best advice.
I would say morally obligated, if nothing else.
Yes, that's the best way to say it.
So the professionals, and I think this is pretty prevalent in most states. The professionals are held accountable to report,
Yes.
where the layperson doesn't really have much for recourse.
Right, and also we have to keep in mind, I mean, most people don't even know that they're looking for abuse. They don't even know what it looks and sounds like. So we can't put any responsibility on people who aren't trained to look for it either.
Right, right. And sometimes they could be projecting their own experience onto the situation and be erroneous as well, right?
It's a great that yes, exactly. So I would say that again, if you're looking in on a family and you're concerned, maybe there is someone in the community you could talk to. Maybe, that could give you some guidance. Someone at school, a teacher, a religious individual, the police, but it's going to be really hard until that family, whoever the victim is ready to leave. It's going to be hard. And
So,
oh,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, we're very pro family here in the United States. We keep families together. So just don't expect it when you report something, they're not going to rip the kids out.
Yeah, it's been, I've witnessed, divorced couples, and they have equal custody, and there's clear signs that one of the
Yes.
parents is abusing the children, and it's just next to impossible to prove, to get the child away from the situation. And that's that pro-family thing, isn't it?
Yeah, and we now have a law here in Bucks County, Pennsylvania, called Megan's Law. I don't know that much about it. It may be a state law, but a little girl, parents were in a custody battle, and the court did not listen to the mother when she said he is dangerous, and the girl did go home with the dad for the weekend, and he killed her.
Oh,
So we have to remember, I think it's a really important point to remember that we as victims and survivors don't go around screaming abuse for the heck of it. We have to be listened to. If you're going to take the step of actually trying to protect your family from an abuser, I know very few cases where people have lied about it.
but they're accused of it all the time, aren't they?
Yes, and there are cases. A friend of mine was falsely accused of abuse because there was an ongoing divorce dispute and his wife wanted leverage. Um, I don't hear that often, though.
And also, when the husband is the one being abused in a family situation, it's very likely that if there's an altercation, it can be twisted around and he looks like the abuser.
Absolutely. Every victim has been accused of being the abuser that I've met.
Wow.
I
Wow.
was.
Goodness. So, do you believe that the people that are the abusers really believe their own press at some point?
Absolutely. I believe that there were maybe 5 times as I looked back, and I only saw this in hindsight, where I saw the truest heart of my abuser, who was not abusive. But for the most part, they need to believe a very trumped up version of themselves to be able to maintain their ego.
And you get to be the stair step for that.
They literally step right on your back and leave
Mhm,
marks.
mhm.
Yes, exactly, and
Exactly.
so the more that they can put you down, the better.
How common is this kind of abuse in this country?
Like I said, 25% of men, 33% of women, 50% of the LGBTQ and disability community, and that's just what's reported. There's a smidge of research just starting to be talked about where 85% of us are impacted by domestic violence every single day. So it may be your colleague or your sister who calls you and shares stories that impacts you and your day as well. And so we need to start to have the conversations of safety planning, which you and I already talked about, and leading people towards resources and being able to say, I'm here, tell me more, instead of, oh my gosh, you should leave him.
Hmm.
"Oh my
Hmm.
gosh, you should leave him," is just gonna put more shame and guilt on her, and that's not what our victim needs right now. What she needs is a lot of understanding.
So, if you suspect, say you're a person that suspects a family member or a loved one or a friend is in an abusive situation, would educating yourself first be advisable? And if so, where do you get the education to know how to handle this?
That's a fantastic question. I'm so glad you asked that. So, the first thing is there's a national domestic violence hotline, as well as domestic violence hotlines located out of most of our domestic violence centers. You, as an individual who are concerned about a victim, you have the right to call in, or I should say, the ability to call in and get help navigating your situation. I'm concerned. What do I say? They'll probably say, create safe space, make sure that they know that you're here and listening, and don't say the guilty phrases of "you deserve better" or "I would never deserve this." So that's the first thing. And then you've also established contact for yourself, but now you can also tell your friend or family member or loved one, "I'm not comfortable with what I'm hearing. This doesn't sound safe for me. How can I help you?" And I think one of the most important things you can say to a victim is this: "I don't know what this is. I don't know how we're going to get you out of this or what's going to make this safer for you. But I'm going to be here with you through the whole thing. I'm not going to abandon you."
So they know that you're not going to be freaked out by the information. Are some victims concerned that if they come to someone, they'll be rejected because, a lot of people never underestimate the power of denial, right?
Absolutely. And, you could be best friends with your sister in law, the abuser's sister, and you go to her for advice or help. She's probably going to tell her brother.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us learn that the hard way. And she's going to, because she wants her brother in her life, and maybe her brother doesn't cause a lot of problems for her, and she just has to see him at the holidays, but she wants her family together for the holidays. Maybe she's not even going to either care, or she's going to try to get on his good side even more. They're what's called flying monkeys. And it's an actual term in narcissistic abusive relationships. The abuser has monkeys, flying monkeys around him who are trained to do his bidding.
If the abuser came from an abusive situation, obviously his siblings probably did as well. Does their abuse in common put them into a place where they are in agreement on a false reality?
I think they're always in an agreement on a false reality about him. Oh, and or they're never going to step up and try to get him help. That's not part of their MO at all, unless he's on their couch or causing them unless he's abusing them as well, which I will say he is abusing the other people in his life because he's not allowing them to say their truth either. So that's important to remember. And yes, they like that who doesn't like the false reality of everybody comes from a loving family, right? And if that serves you, you want to maintain that. And usually, in my experience, they say, "Not my problem."
Yeah, and whoever rocks the boat gets to be the enemy, right?
Yeah. And it's really awful because families are weakened. I believe people are weakened and relationships are weakened when you have an abuser in the mix in the family.
Is it usually isolated or does it run in family lines?
I don't have data to support that. It was not as I mean, I don't know what other relationships in my abuser's family looked like to say. I will say that there was a deep need of everybody to cover it up.
Gotcha.
At the
Well,
same time, they warned me about it though. So that was kind of interesting also. "Are you sure you want to be with him? He's allowed to handle." But never, "This is dangerous for you and your daughters." They had my daughters in it. So,
well, we're about out of time, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what's your mission?
oh, I'm on a mission to raise awareness, educate individuals, because I believe that that leads to empowerment and growth. And I truly am on a mission to save all the people. I never want anyone to go through what I went through ever again.
That's a beautiful mission because from the stats you gave us, it's much needed out there, isn't it?
Yes, and thank you for being part of the solution. I believe it's really strong individuals like you who give precious airspace to the work. We will help someone out there, even if it's someone helping a victim, even if it's someone who, someone out there will say, "Oh, wait, this is what Mary is going through." And they'll have heard it on your show. And that is incredibly powerful that you do that. So thank you.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Jennifer and I will have to part at this point. Our guest this hour has been Dr. Jennifer Gardella. Jennifer is the author of Domestic Violence Awareness. Listen for Whispers of Abuse. To find out more about Jennifer and where you can get her book, visit her website, jennifergardella.com. This has been Mission Evolution with Gwilda Wiyaka. For more information or to enjoy past archived episodes, visit www.missionevolution.org. But please be sure to join us next time right here on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, as this mission continues, bringing information, resources, and support to our evolving world.